You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, as well as being the designated hitter of my life, is a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Oh, Jeff, I cannot tell you how glad I am to be back with you today, because I'm not. No, just kidding. I love this so much. I just wanted to get the zinger in right away. So let's get to it.
That was a good singer. Okay, we want you to start your week off right with our podcast. So we drop a new episode every Monday morning at 9 Eastern, and we drop a supplemental episode where we go a little bit broader into the topic of the week, and we do that on Wednesday again at 9. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcast, or you can watch our hottest and spiciest clips, and now full episodes on the Cinemental Podcast channel of YouTube. We have spun it off, so we have two different channels. One talks more about mental health, one talks more about filmmaking, and both are righteously awesome.
Yeah, we are getting really big in our minds.
Totally. Okay, Moneyball. We're talking about Moneyball today. Moneyball is based on the true story of Oakland A's general manager Billy Beane, who used data-driven analytics, nothing more sexy and entertaining than data-driven analytics, to rebuild his team after losing his star players. Defying baseball tradition, Beane's unconventional approach led the underfunded A's to a record-breaking 20-game winning streak in the 2002 season, forever changing how the game is played. And that is not an understatement. It really did change the way that baseball was played, the way that managers manage their teams. This was a cataclysmic change to a sport.
Yeah, I would say that it more changed how the front office acquired and valued players than how managers managed their teams. But I think, obviously the way you construct your team drops down into how you put them on the field, and you had some of the tension that came about that. But yeah, and the Boston Red Sox 2 years later broke their drought, their World Series drought since 1918, and winning their first World Series since then. And they credited the Moneyball and sabermetrics revolution for constructing their team.
But in terms of mental health, Josh, what are we talking about today?
What I love about this podcast is that we can find mental health topics to talk about in almost any movie. And a lot of people are going to go, why are you talking about Moneyball? Well, I mean, obviously it's baseball playoff time. My beloved Seattle Mariners are actually in the playoffs for the first time. So that's why we're talking about Moneyball. The great thing about Moneyball is that you've got, I think, two intertwined mental health themes going through it. One is innovation. What does it take to be a groundbreaker? And how do you overcome some of the barriers to that?
Sure.
And really intertwined with that, and a topic I think a lot of people are going to miss, is anxiety. And how much the character Billy Beane was wrestling with his anxiety throughout the entire film. And that's what we're going to take a deep dive into on Wednesday, is anxiety, how it's portrayed in the movie, and why what you're seeing are manifestations of over-anxiousness.
Thank you for that, Josh. I found myself while you were talking doing that thing where I pretended to not know, and you were like, we're going to talk about anxiety. I was like, oh, interesting. As if I don't already have a bunch of things that I want to say about anxiety, as if we didn't talk about it in advance. I was like, oh, can't wait to learn more from you. Learn more stuff that we've already talked about.
Yeah. Hey, folks, that was a little peek behind the scenes that Jeff just gave you.
Baby.
Also a way for him to tell me to fuck off a little.
No, not in the least. Not in the least. Nope. I will not take that on. The one thing we don't tell each other about in advance is the top 5, which I think is a lot of fun. So I don't know what you're going to say for our top 5 this week. I know the topic, but I don't know who's in your top 5, and I think that's a lot of fun. Josh, we have a sponsor this week, which I'm excited about. We're delving into, and this I think could be big, because obviously coffee is a huge industry. And I personally used to buy coffee based on taste. That's a big mistake. It turns out I've been drinking underperforming beans my whole life. Then I found this new brand started by an ex-baseball GM who decided flavor was overrated. He built his entire company around one metric, caffeine to dollar ratio. That's it. No fancy foam, no art on the cup, just raw efficiency. I don't even like the taste, but statistically speaking, I've never been more awake than I am right now. So if you care less about joy and more about measurable productivity, you might want to look into Billy's Beans. And that is our sponsor of the day.
That is really fantastic. I mean, that's fantastic. That is fantastic. I mean, look, I hope Billy Beane
drinking Starbucks.
I hope Billy Beane listens to this podcast because I can see him going, that's a great idea.
That's a great idea. Yeah. If you haven't seen the movie, this is the true story of when the Oakland A's lose a bunch of their star players. They lose Jason Giambi, Isringhauser, and Johnny Damon. They lose 3 megastars. And they lose it because it's an unfair game where they were paying $40 million to the Yankees $120 million at the time. They just couldn't compete with the deep pockets of larger franchises. So Billy Beane is forced to find a new way to build a winning team. In the movie, he partners with Peter Brand, a young Yale economist, who introduces him to a radical idea using sabermetrics, data, and on-base percentages to identify undervalued players that other teams would overlook. Despite ridicule from scouts, coaches, and the media, Beane assembled a roster of misfits and rejects, betting the season on math instead of instinct. And as the team struggled early on, internal pressure mounted, and Beane faces the possibility that his experiment is failing and he would lose his job. But as the players embrace the system, the A's ignite an unprecedented 20-game winning streak. That part is true, capturing national attention and changed the conversation around baseball forever. Though the team ultimately fell short in the postseason, Beane's gamble reshaped the sport, proving that innovation and belief can outplay money and tradition. So Josh, a lot of times we start with a diagnosis of the character, but I don't think that that's what this movie is really about. And obviously we're going to talk about his anxiety a little bit later, but this is really a movie about revolution and about revolutionizing and about revolutionizing an industry and what it takes to do that. So my first question to you is, what does it take to revolutionize an industry?
It takes confidence. What it really takes is a bunch of failures.
Right.
Innovation is a bunch of failures, and you fail over and over and over again trying something until you get it right and until it pushes things forward. This is a movie about innovation in baseball, but you can apply this to any endeavor in the human experience.
Right, which is why I think it's fun to talk about. I mean, this is not just like, how do you innovate a sport? How do you innovate anything?
You have to be willing to fail.
Right.
And being willing to fail involves a significant amount of confidence. Confidence that you're going to be able to bounce back, confidence that you're on the right path. And it also takes a lot of attempts. I think one of the things I didn't love about this movie, and I think it's, you'll talk to us in a bit about what it takes to adapt a book into a movie. It made it seem like all Billy Beane's eggs were in this one basket, and he was taking this big swing, with no experience with sabermetrics or even knowing about it, which, in real life, contrasting it to real life, of course, wasn't true. I mean, sabermetrics had been around for a while. It just hadn't been applied in this way. And he had all his beans in one basket. No, all his eggs in one basket. And it was a make or break with no fallback plan. And that's not really how innovation works. I mean, innovation is a bunch of failures piled on top of each other, and the lessons from each one building up to something bigger that in hindsight you look back at as an innovation.
How do you get there from a mental health standpoint, though? I don't think it's just about confidence. You have to go completely against the grain.
Yeah.
And if you have the confidence, you're probably already winning. If it was just about confidence, we would see innovation more often than we do.
I think we do see more innovation than we think we do.
That's fair.
And again, the big innovations, the groundbreaking innovations don't come along very often, but they are built on a bunch of smaller innovations.
Right.
And a bunch of failures. So I will push back on you, Jeff. I do think it is about confidence. Now, confidence is about mastering your own anxiety and your own over-anxiousness.
That's well said.
Let's talk a little bit about anxiety. We're going to do a deep dive on it on Wednesday, but I think it's important to know that anxiety is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Anxiety,
we'll get there. We'll get there.
Well, I think it's important to talk about that if you want to talk about confidence.
Okay, that's fair. And are you saying, and I don't think it's unfair to say, do you think that anxiety is the flip side of confidence?
They're intertwined. I don't think it's a flip side. I think that they're married.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I buy that.
Yeah, they're married. Anxiety can both push you into innovation, and over anxiousness can prevent you from taking the risk that might be an innovation.
Right.
I'll just tease it like that.
Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers talks about how it's also partly like the right time. It's not just what you do, it's about, your time in history. And I think there's something important about innovation where a company has to be okay with the failures that it takes to innovate. If Billy Beane had been fired because of his failures, then he never would have gotten to innovation. And I think that there are a lot of people who want to innovate, but don't have the time and know that they don't have the time. I think about this a lot with like football coaches, where you're given like 2 years to build a winning team or you're fired. You don't have the time to fail. You don't have the time to try new things. And so even if you have the confidence to be an innovator, you also have to be in a position where you're going to be allowed the room to fail in order to get to that innovation. And that takes a lot of trust. That takes a lot of trust on the owner's part or the people in charge's part.
Sure. 2 points I want to make. When you're looking at like the innovation in football or in any sport, the innovation at the top levels, the coaches have already decided what they're going to do. They don't become an NFL head coach and go, oh, now I'm going to try this thing. I mean, the big innovators, they've tried it at other levels. They've tried it as offensive coordinators. They've tried it in college. Then they go to the pros. So my point is that all these innovations are built on iterations, trying, failing, honing what you've got, and then at some point it's identified in hindsight as a big innovation.
Yeah.
I think another thing that you point out, you said that a lot of it's about timing, and I really think it is. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about lately, about how we humans want to downplay the effect of blind luck in our experiences.
100%.
And we want to do that because it is a little bit
blind luck and privilege.
It's overwhelming. Well, I would say privilege is a lot of luck.
Yeah.
So
what you're born into, exactly.
Right. Blind luck takes the mastery out of it, takes our control, takes our perceived sense of control as human beings out of the equation, and can actually, if you follow it down a rabbit hole, can lead to a lot of nihilism. Like, well, what's the point of even trying if everything's all luck? Everything's not all luck, but I think we don't appreciate or acknowledge how much of what we achieve or don't achieve is luck.
Yeah, and my counter to that, and I think that you would agree, and I think you kind of just said it, is if it's free to play the lottery, play it 1,000,000 times and you're going to win. And yes, you'll be lucky when you win, but like the more times you put yourself in a position to be lucky, the more you will succeed. It's the law of big numbers. Sort of a mix of that. You think about like trust fund kids can start 4 or 5 businesses, and if the 5th one succeeds, then great. But if you don't have a lot of money behind you and you try once and you fail, that's your shot. I think those go hand in hand.
That's exactly right. That's why in the movie, for me, the whole conceit that, well, this is Billy Beane's one shot, and he's throwing it all at this thing that he doesn't really know anything about. That just kind of hits hollow for me. That wasn't the true story.
No.
But it was what was portrayed in the movie. This was built on iterations and iterations. In real life, he got handed kind of a proto-sabermetrics team from his the previous GM, Alderson, who kind of tutored him in this, and then he hooked up with a guy named Paul Podesta,
who's the Peter Brand character.
Yeah, who's the Peter Brand character
who went to Harvard instead of Yale, which was very interesting.
Sure.
Yeah,
they really kind of honed this.
They did not want that guy to sue them, clearly, because they just changed enough.
Well, the story
I read,
let
the metrics guy sue us.
The story, yeah, right, exactly. you got 78.6% of the character incorrect.
Exactly.
I do want to make clear. I think this is a good time to make it clear. When I'm going to talk about the psychiatric diagnosis and the anxiety of the Billy Beane character, I'm talking about the character. I'm not talking about Billy Beane the man. We've talked about this before. It's unethical for a psychiatrist to opine about the mental health of somebody they haven't examined. Right. So I'm talking about the movie Billy Beane character. I don't know anything about Billy Beane. Actually did have a few of his baseball cards way back in the day. But we're talking about the Billy Beane character and his anxiety and his drive towards innovation in the movie.
Yeah. There's a couple more things I want to say about innovation, Josh, and then I'll ask you a specific question about Billy. Here's the important part, I think, about innovation that I think some people do miss. You have to start the habit of innovation as early as humanly possible. And I think about this with a guy like Billy Beane, who in the book Moneyball, they talk about how he was the biggest and strongest. And so for 20 years, he was able to get by on his bigness and his strongness and his strength rather than learning about the game. And so even if you're on top, analyze your weaknesses, figure out ways you can get better, and practice innovating. Because at some point, you will face people who are better than you, who are bigger than you, who are stronger, and you're going to need to innovate. And if you haven't practiced innovating, you're going to fall behind. And innovation is really just about an analysis of strengths and weaknesses. And you can practice that as early as childhood. It's a skill like anything else. You know, you develop the ability to see the angles, to see the pitfalls, the shortfalls. Just as a general piece of advice, practice innovating early. I didn't do it when it came to sports. I was 6'8". Everybody was like, you're the tallest guy, go be the center. If I could do it over again, I would have trained myself to be a point guard. I remember when I was 11, I won a ball handling contest, and everybody was like, stop ball handling, get down on the post. Man, if I'd have been a 6'8" point guard, like Magic Johnson was a 6'9" point guard, I'd have had a much better chance of achieving my goals of the NBA. But I was forced into the traditional role of a tall person. And, you know, in a way that completely screwed me. And I had a more innovative mind, then I think I would have gone farther.
Another basketball related story is that of Michael Jordan. And I think what you point out is, you know, practicing, innovating, and looking at what you're not good at and getting better and better. That's what really separates the greats. In sports is the obvious one, but in others as well. Yeah. Michael Jordan was fantastic at dunking. He was fantastic at being quick. He was fantastic at jumping. He spent the mid part of his career after they hadn't made the playoffs, after they had a couple playoff flameouts, on shooting and passing. Because he knew that those are the parts that he wasn't as good at. I mean, he was still great at them, but he wasn't as good at them. That's how you cross that threshold into greatness.
I love that Joe Dumars story where he's like, there's only one guy who could beat me, and it was Joe Dumars. Defensively, it was like, there's one guy that could beat me, and it was Joe. And so I developed a post-up game, you know, and then Joe was like, yeah, as soon as he developed it, then it was over. He just took me down to the post and it was game over. But it's like, that's it. That's the innovation. You know, the best in the world still innovating. Okay, let's get into the psychology of the character Billy Beane a little bit. Mm-hmm. He doesn't watch the games, which I think was really interesting. And when I first watched the movie, I was like, there's no way that that's true. But I don't know. From a mental health standpoint, that might actually be true.
Yeah, I think that's a manifestation of his anxiety.
Right.
It is physically painful to sit there and watch the anticipation of what's going to happen.
Right.
Have it play through your mind. Oh, how did I screw up and bring this player on, et cetera, et cetera. They didn't show that. They showed a lot of him being Brad Pitt by himself, which was great. But they didn't talk about the inner monologue, but you could see it in his face. That was all anxiety. That was all over anxiousness played out. And his coping mechanism was to be by himself. He just couldn't stomach it. I mean, you had some great scenes where he would flip on the radio just briefly, hear a snippet, flip it off really quick.
Yeah.
That's an over anxious behavior.
Yeah. And do you think it was based on control, Josh? Because like at that point, he couldn't control anything. So it's like, I've done my part. There's nothing I can do to control this. I'm not going to watch these guys do their thing. This isn't my part of the store.
The obvious defense mechanism for an over-anxious person is to try to gain control over that which you fear.
Right.
Most anxiety is anticipation of what's going to happen in the future. Yeah. So the bastion of the over-anxious person is to try to control what's going to happen. And you can do that in a variety of ways. You can become a perfectionism. You can avoid it like he did. You can, develop more healthier coping skills like leaning into it, trying to innovate, trying to master that, trying to face the anxiety. But yes, that is about control. Controlling the unknown is the perceived salvation of the over-anxious person.
Oh, that's well said. Say that again. Is the perceived...
Controlling the unknown is the perceived salvation of the over-anxious person.
Oof. Oof. See, those big words work for me. Like that just,
I say perceived because it's a false summit. You're going to try to think that you control something and like, yes, I've got this. But there's always another summit because there's always the future coming. And that's not what we teach people to do when we try to teach them to control their over-anxiousness. It's not about control. It's really about acceptance that you can't control.
Right. Well, and that is the thing. I mean, control is always an illusion. Always. I used to have a lot of anxiety, and what really helped me was a book that Mom gave me, which was Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, just reading all the koans and, some Buddhist philosophy. But I remember listening to Bruce Lee saying, like, be water. Don't be rigid. Be water. Be that which flows. And it's like if you're put in a bowl, you become the bowl. And always be flexible, always be changing. And I was like, that's so true. And there are times where I feel anxious, and I'm like, no, just be water. Just flow and let what happens happen. It's very helpful to me to have like just that, be water, in a moment of anxiety, be water.
That just made me have to pee.
Okay, so Josh, we're going to cover anxiety a lot more on Wednesday. Yeah. I just want to touch on a couple moments from the movie that I thought were fantastic from a storytelling standpoint, from a mental health standpoint, from all of it. There's a great line one of the scouts says to Billy. We're all told that we can't play the children's game anymore. Sometimes it's at 18, sometimes it's at 40, but we're all told. And I love that line. And I believe that line, and I know what he's saying, where you'll become a professional, and because he's talking to Billy Beane, he's like, you'll become a professional, but at some point, you're not going to be good enough for this game. But I actually think that it happens earlier than that. And I think it happens when you finally realize that there are stakes to the game. And that's when it stops becoming a children's game. And it's really disheartening to me that is happening earlier and earlier and earlier. By the time you get to the 7th grade now, people are starting to pay attention to you and look at you from a monetary standpoint. I don't know that I was ready for that when I was in high school, when I was in the 8th grade, and all of a sudden, like, New Balance was giving me shoes and Nike was giving me jerseys. And it stopped being a fun game. It started to be a job. So I don't know. There's a lot to that line to kind of unpack, but I loved it. It's just, I loved that line. And I don't know if that was a Sorkin thing, or because Aaron Sorkin was the writer along with Steve Zalian, or if that is a line that scouts tell people. But I loved that line.
It doesn't seem like it was a Sorkin thing because they weren't walking through a hallway while they were saying it. But I think your point is really well taken. And, well, you're in your 40s. I am now in my 50s. Whew. And you're talking about what was really a long time ago. I think it's gotten a lot worse. I mean, I'm hearing from friends who've got kids who did more traditional sports than mine did, that they're like, yeah, you got to pick which sport you're going to concentrate on in the 7th grade. And these aren't kids who are obviously going to go pro. These are ones who just want to make like a varsity high school team. And they're like, well, if you want to be a high school basketball player for, rural America, you've got to be doing nothing but basketball since 7th grade. I mean, you and I I was a 4-sport athlete in high school. I mean, you could do different things.
Why you got to throw shade like that?
Well, because you concentrated more on
I did. I concentrated more on
basketball. You didn't play football like I did because you didn't. We didn't want you to get torn in half at 6'8".
That's really nice of you to say. I just didn't like football. I did not like it. I thought that the players were toxic. It just wasn't fun. It was not fun. The players were just mean. Football players are just mean. And I know they have to be. It's a much more aggressive sport. But I was like, the coaches there did not build a supportive environment. So I was out. It wasn't my thing.
Huh. Well, I love football. Football was my favorite sport to participate in. I wasn't particularly good. I loved it. That was my favorite.
Okay,
so we'll stick a pin in that one.
Yeah, we'll stick a pin. So we're going to talk a little bit about the theme of the movie here in a little bit, but I want to talk about my favorite scene of the movie, which is a scene that like everybody else probably forgets. But Billy Beane is haunted by this notion that a scout got it wrong about him, and it forever changed his life. And he wanted to go to Stanford. Yeah. He really wanted to go to Stanford, and he chose the money. And so after meeting Peter Brandt, he calls him drunk and asks, when would you have drafted me? He's like, I know you looked me up. I know you ran me through your computer when I left. Where would you have drafted me? And he was like, oh, you were a good player. You were great. He's like, nah, tell me the truth. And he says, I would have taken you in the 9th round, no signing bonus. And he goes, yeah, pack your bags, Pete, you're coming to Oakland. Because he knows, like, this kid is right. That's where I actually should have gone. And I love that scene because it speaks so clearly to theme. And Brad Pitt just played that moment to perfection. But in the movie, that's the committal to Moneyball. That's the moment where he commits to sabermetrics. And I just thought it was a great moment in the movie.
I love sabermetrics. I was a big devotee early, like in middle school when I started to look at this stuff and got Bill James's first book. I was entranced because it went beyond just, baseball counts everything, right? You count wins, you count strikeouts, you count everything.
Yeah, that is your jam for sure.
Yeah, and even like batting average is considered a second order statistic because you're dividing hits by at bats, but these things are complex algorithms. I do think that there really is a limit. The movie doesn't really delve into this. I mean, there's a limit. Statistics can't predict the future.
Right.
They made this big thing about, well, I just want you to get on base. Statistics tell you what has happened in the past. It doesn't predict the future. It can be a guide, but they made it seem like, well, we cracked the code. I mean, kinda, but they cracked the code for 2 years and then everybody had it and everybody used it. That is the other thing with innovation, is that you are innovative for a blink of an eye.
Right. And then everybody immediately catches up.
Yeah.
And speaking just specifically about, sabermetrics, one of the issues I think with it is there's just never going to be a large enough sample size. If someone has 100 at bats and they have a certain on-base percentage, 100 still might not be enough to accurately predict what somebody's going to do.
Well, no, of course it's not. But you could have 1,000. You could have 10,000 at bats, and it's not going to be able to take into account everything that's going on, especially age. Age is the real confounder, right? Age catches up with everybody in sports and in performance.
Yeah, everybody but Tom Brady. Kind of the exception that proves the rule a little bit,
I mean, it would get caught up to him. He couldn't go back now and do it.
No.
We think.
But I mean, I'm being a little tongue in cheek there, Josh. But thanks for going along with it.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Jeff. I mean, you start talking about Tom Brady, and I just get a faraway look in my eye. So,
the days of yore. Although Drake May doing a pretty good job over in New England.
Yeah. I mean, we're recording this the day after Drake May and the New England Patriots beat the Buffalo Bills wearing their white on white college uniforms. Anyways, whatever. Yeah. Sorry, that's for our sports podcast, as you keep reminding me. This is a movie podcast, movie mental health podcast, Josh. Jeff, so I want to ask you a question about this movie. Sure. I mean, I saw Moneyball a long time ago when it first came out. I haven't seen it since. I watched it again for this podcast. I didn't remember a whole lot of how the movie was constructed.
Okay.
So and I know that we got a lot of nominations, and Brad Pitt got nominated as Best Actor for this movie.
Uh-huh.
Here's my question. Moneyball is 133 minutes long.
Right.
A full 10 minutes of the movie are shots of Brad Pitt alone, not talking.
Right.
That seems like a lot.
Did you time that?
I did. I went back in time. I went back and timed it because it struck me as I was like, man, he is just sitting there. He's just sitting there driving, just staring ahead, looking just great. Brad Pitt. I mean, look, it's not bad to look at. That's not what I'm saying. But a full 10 minutes of that movie was him just not talking, staring straight ahead or something. Yeah. That seems like a lot. Tell me about that choice and what that did for the movie.
Oh, that's interesting. That is not the question I thought you were going to ask. The long and short of it is, you're giving the audience breathing room in those moments.
From statistics,
from whatever. Like there's a tension and release that happens, throughout every movie, and so you want to give people moments of like a release of tension, and sometimes those are meant to build the tension. When he's like watching and the game is going on. And you're sort of imagining what's going on in his brain. And we've done the work to tell you enough about how his brain works that we can imagine that. So you have some of those moments where he's just staring straight ahead. A great moment is when he's staring straight ahead, he's listening to the game, and he hears Hatterberg connect, and his head pops up. We earned that moment because we've seen a lot of moments of him just staring straight ahead, and now getting excited, which he didn't allow himself to do. And that says a lot about the character, where it's like you can be really cool about a goal of yours until you get right to the point of getting it, and then everybody gets a little bit nervous. No matter who you are, it's like, oh, I've been working for this my whole life, but now it's on the line. So that moment is earned. It's essentially just a way of releasing tension. That's really what it does. And if you're a director and you're directing Brad Pitt, you're going to get a lot of B-roll of just Brad Pitt's face.
Sure.
There was 10 minutes of him staring straight ahead. There's probably 50 minutes of that ended up on the cutting room floor. They just picked the best, hottest 10 minutes of Brad Pitt. They gave him different things to eat, and it's like, which I still love is like Brad Pitt's thing is that he's always eating in every movie. And like, in this, at some point, he like takes down a Twinkie.
And a banana. He had a banana too. I remember that one. Yeah, when I timed
Very
it, I was like,
foods, oddly enough.
When I timed it, I was surprised it was only 10 minutes. When I watched it, I thought it was like 20. So it's like, well, yeah. If you're gonna just show pictures of somebody on screen, I guess Brad Pitt's the right guy to do it.
Yeah. How often was Jonah Hill on the screen by himself? I'm sorry, Jonah. That was a low blow.
Look, this is a great performance by Jonah Hill. I think Jonah Hill's a very good actor.
Yeah,
he did a fabulous job. Also, I had forgotten that Hatterberg was played by a young Chris Pratterberg.
Yeah, and apparently he got jacked for that movie because they said no to him kind of over and over, and he just like really got in shape, and they were still looking for a guy to do it. And then he came back and he's like, look, I can do this now. And they were like, oh, yeah, shit, you really did get in shape. Good for you, buddy. I think that was this movie. I know he did that for a role. I'm pretty sure it was for this one.
I think it was post Parks and Recreation for Guardians of the Galaxy.
I'm going to look that up and I'm going to put it in the comments. Okay, Josh, that's a lot of good stuff. We're going to talk more about anxiety on Wednesday. I'm going to talk about how to adapt a book. Because this was an adaptation and it's not at all a faithful adaptation of the book. They had to make it into a movie, and I think that's really interesting. And I'm actually coming off of adapting a book. I was paid to adapt a book these last couple of months, and so I've gone through the process of it. So we're going to do that on Wednesday, and you're going to give us your top 5, which I'm excited about. But for now, thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of Moneyball. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we'd love to hear what you'd like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. Follow Dr. Josh Jones, America's psychiatrist, on Blue Sky. This has been a Large and in Charge production. For Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we'll see you on Wednesday.
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.